President Trump holding a cabinet meeting after he brokered a historic peace deal. Israel and Hamas agreeing to the first phase that would end the 2-year-long war. The pact, which will be rolled out in steps, requires Hamas to release all 48 of the remaining hostages, both dead and alive. And in exchange, Israel will withdraw from Gaza to the yellow line you see drawn on the map there. President Trump says he's planning to be in the Middle East when the ink dries on history.
We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We are getting the hostages back on Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday. And that'll be a day of joy. We're going to see to it. Gaza is going to be slowly redone. You have tremendous wealth in that part of the world by certain countries, and just a small part of that, what they make will do wonders for Gaza.
The media struggling to wrap their heads around how the man they've spent a decade criticizing is now delivering this peace. Some reactions were glowing, but others not so much.
Joe Biden could never do that, and Donald Trump was able to do it.
Do you worry that Trump wants to get the Nobel Prize on Friday? And it's sort of, I mean, I really don't mean that as a joke.
And if we see those remaining hostages freed and Israel begin its withdrawal, it is a remarkable achievement.
I don't want to diminish the importance of this, and obviously, blessed are the peacemakers indeed, but it is worth pointing out, this is a ceasefire deal, right? This is not a larger peace deal.
All credit to President Trump.
Tomorrow, the winner of last year's Nobel Peace Prize will be announced, and President Trump couldn't resist taking a little jab at that committee to give the honor to President Obama. Remember that?
Obama got a prize. He didn't even know what he got. He got elected, and they gave it to Obama for doing absolutely nothing but destroying our country. No, he was not a good president.
Charlie, I think it was significant. David Ignatius is the foreign policy columnist for the Washington Post, long time there, who in that clip said Biden couldn't have done this.
Yeah.
And you think about Kamala Harris, who, remember, she said, I've looked at the maps, there's nothing more that could be done. Everybody should just fold their tents and go home. But President Trump bet on America, and he used American leverage. He never wavered. He gave Israel the space to do what it needed to do to get to this point so that he could come in and say, okay, this is how we do this. And remarkably, Hamas agrees to release all the hostages at once in the first phase, which can give the Israelis some comfort that a lot of their sacrifice was worth it.
Yeah, it's nothing short of breathtaking, and David Ignatius is right. Joe Biden never could have done it, even though Joe Biden is probably the most experienced foreign policy expert Washington has ever created, and he did nothing but make a mess of the place. And I do think it's really significant that today is also the 9-year anniversary of when the Nobel Committee gave Barack Obama the Nobel Prize.
Okay.
And, of course, countless wars, countless terrorist attacks later, you have a guy that is sort of the anti-Obama, the opposite of Obama. Obama was a figment of the media's imagination. Every caricature that you've seen of Donald Trump being a fascist, a Nazi, evil, all these things, is also a caricature, but it's like their villain. They've created this media villain. And the idea that this comes on a day like today, I think, is so sweet. And nobody is exposed as being a fraud more. I mean, obviously, Obama is exposed as a fraud. Joe Biden is exposed as a fraud. But nobody is exposed as a fraud as much as the media.
Yeah. And I think, Greg, you think about a lot of the Israelis who not only did you have the IDF fighting, but you had so many people in Israel, one, marching every day, never forgetting. And you had so many reservists who were going in there and putting that pressure on. Then you had President Trump agree to help Israel to go after Iran. Now you have all these proxies that are weakened. It is a remarkably changed region in just this first 9 months of the year.
I guess I just feel bad for the American protest movement. How about all those activists who traded in their signs for George Floyd, to BLM, to Palestine, then they had their climate change signs. Now they have to figure out what's next. You can't do trans, that's over. You can't do climate, no one cares. No more BLM, it's a fraud. I guess you could start with banning ICE. That might be something new. Maybe bacteria rights. We haven't gotten that far yet. I remember the early days when people used to accuse Trump of being a mafia don, as though that were an insult. It's actually true. He is a mafia don, and that's a compliment. What does a mob boss do? He creates a distinction between pleasing him and displeasing him. If you're a mafia don, he might kiss you twice on the cheeks, or he might cut your pinky off. And if people find out that it's just not worth the trouble with Trump, who is relentless, to piss him off. Right? This is how I run my staff. It's like, no point in disagreeing with me. I'll make your life hell. And that's kind of what he does, because he won't quit. And that's the comparison. There is something to be said about comparing him to Kamala and Biden. Kamala was about fear. She was terrified of her own shadow. She was scared of actually doing anything. Biden didn't care. He just liked to wear the jacket and the aviators. The other interesting thing about a mafia don is that their primary job is to keep the peace. But in order to keep the peace, you also have to express a glimmer of specific violence when necessary. And Trump had that too with Soleimani, the Iran facilities, the pirates. I'm probably leaving something out.
Midnight Hammer.
Midnight Hammer. That was my nickname in college, Emily. Oh, and also the cartels. The cartels. Whether you are a contractor or a mob boss, you also need clientele. You need a track record. And Trump had been building the track record all this time, unlike any president, with the Abraham Accords, the half dozen peace treaties, and what do you call them, truce deals. So if you thought this was impossible, you at least thought, well, maybe if it is possible, this guy seems like he's been down this road, he's done it before. I don't think it's an understatement to say that he's the greatest president we have ever had. And
I think he has a new foreign policy doctrine, right? So everyone tries to figure out, what's the foreign policy doctrine? Remember, Obama's was leading from behind. And what Trump has, he's like, okay, use American leadership to end conflicts, lend a hand where you can, and that at the end of the day, aim for whatever ends a conflict fastest with the least amount of bloodshed, and then try to figure out a way for incentives, Harold, to keep the peace longer lasting, because this is just phase one, and I know that there's caution and all of that, but the next phases shows a brighter future for the Middle East should they want to take it.
Good to be with you. I hadn't seen you in a while. You're right. I give the president a lot of credit here today. It's important. Charlie talked about an anniversary, an important one, but 1 month ago today, recall the Israelis intended, the objective was to kill some of the Hamas negotiators in Qatar. And it was in response from the day before. Remember, 2 Palestinian militants had killed 6 people on a bus in East Jerusalem. That day, President Trump, that following day, President Trump was concerned, and he was critical of the Israelis, saying that you had invaded the sovereign space. The Qataris were upset. But it was that moment that I think that really pushed things into gear. The president called the Israelis. The Israelis had done an incredible job of allowing the Midnight Hammer, your nickname in college, to actually happen, because they had demolished and created safety in the airspace. But it was really the last month, and I give the president tremendous credit for what he's done. And there's no doubt. We showed a montage of people talking. We may have done a bit unfair to some of them, but you raised some of the points that I think they were trying to raise, Dana. The ceasefire and the return of hostages are indispensable to us being able to get to the next steps, meaning what does Hamas disarmament look like? What does a political arrangement or configuration in Gaza look like? Will Hamas be a part of it? Obviously, we hope not. What do the Israeli military configuration geographically look like going forward? And how do we think about the economics going forward? Who will contribute the most to rebuilding Gaza to allow for the kind of economic future that President Trump, I think, so eloquently talked about during the press conference with his cabinet members. So I say to Democrats and Republicans, David Ignatius was right. Joe Biden could not have done this. At least he didn't do it in his first term, and it's unlikely he would have behaved as President Trump has behaved over the last several months. I give him much credit for it, but we should not kid ourselves. The next several months are as critical, if not more critical, than the moment we find ourselves in today, as joyous as today is.
Do you think that TDS is now going to have to thaw because it has no choice at this point?
For some people, it probably won't. But you got to hope for saner minds and for middle of the road minds, particularly in my party, it does.
Yeah, but the placards are going to change to our health care.
Yes, there you go.
That's what's next. But the other thing is, so these hostages are expected to be released, Emily, on Monday or Tuesday. Now, Israel also has to give something up. They're basically emptying out their prisons of convicted terrorists, and they have to swallow that. And we also need to brace ourselves for the condition of hopefully the 20 remaining alive. Some of them might not be able to be seen because they are in such bad shape. So we have to brace ourselves for that. And I really admire President Trump for saying, okay, I'll drop right now, and I will fly over there. I will be there to sign this, and maybe even to greet them.
I spoke with some of my friends in Israel today, and of all of their comments and thoughts on the future and a sort of cautionary celebration and everything, nothing comes close to their jubilation over the hostages being returned. And so their considerations of potential future violence and the X's and O's of the remaining 19 points, everything that they feel is toward bringing their own home. And we'll take care of them, and those that need those hope and those that are in those horrific states only underscores what an evil entity Hamas is. And, for all of this celebration, rightly so, we talked about the media, how they're distorting it. But you know who's conspicuously absent from the celebration? Are, weirdly, all of those Democratic lawmakers that have for 2 years been shouting about and holding signs up about and protesting on the grounds of Capitol Hill about a ceasefire. Rashida Tlaib and Delia Ramirez and Pramila Jayapal, Betty McCollum, AOC, silent today. Zero statements on this historic day. And then there's the yes but crew, which, look, I understand that the future might be harder. The future will require work, but I think today there can be a yes and. Yeah. And so we have the yes buts, Hakeem and Ilhan Omar, and they're always going to be crying about genocide and how that's shaped. But for those people who have said that our president is an autocrat and an isolationist, today I hope proves them wrong too, because we heard today in that cabinet meeting just how much he leveraged his existing relationships, how much authority he invested in his team to carry this out. He is not there bombastically beating down doors. He's actually negotiating with grace and with dignity and leveraging that dignity to his members, to his phenomenal team, so that we Americans can benefit from that. And I think, as the Secretary of State said, it's a geopolitical win, of course, but it's a human story. And everything points to that moment when those hostages are returned home. And final quick quote about today, which is, after so much pain, destruction, and loss of life, today the guns in Gaza have gone silent. You know who said that? President Biden. Well, guess what, President Biden? Now President Trump made that statement true.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.